Hello everybody. I think I'm live now. Looks like everything is running all right. So please do, if you're in the chat box, please do leave me a little note to let me know if you can see me and if you can hear me okay. Touch wood, it looks like everything is fine. I'll just have a quick check over here. Brilliant, thank you everybody. You make me laugh, Susan. So today should be a fun session, but before I get started telling you about what I'm going to try and get through for you today, first I have to say sorry for Friday. My hosting company let me down. I had a problem with my website. It is now fixed, so everything should be running fine. Fingers crossed today. Probably shouldn't say that. Touch wood. Everything else. Hopefully we'll be all right. So sorry about that, but thanks for coming today. So we've got an exceptionally beautiful rose to paint. This is a variety that I grow in the garden called Blue Diamond. It's not a David Austin, but it is possibly my favorite rose because of that beautiful low chroma, kind of gentle lavender color. And it makes really beautiful lights and shadows, which you're going to hear me talking about quite a lot today, lights and shadows. Okay, so I'm a firm believer that as complicated as flowers are, it basically boils down to a specific set of skills which anyone can develop with practice. Okay, they all kind of work together to create a feeling of light and shadow, which creates form. And if you can get a strong feeling of light and shadow and you can get a strong feeling of form, then you're 99% of the way there for the kind of painting that we do, realism, you know. I talk about these various skills quite a lot, but they are obvious ones like judging color and being able to draw something out fairly accurately, being able to see value. I've got some stuff I'll be showing you to do with that when you're working from a photo anyway. Once you've judged the colors, being able to mix them accurately, and you know that's my favorite thing, right? I'm going to be going on a little bit about that. And then the manual application with the brush. Did I miss anything? Edges. Edges, hugely important. So you're going to hear me talking a lot today about edges and chroma. So for anyone who isn't too sure what chroma means, firstly, you probably haven't been listening to me very closely because it's pretty much mostly what I talk about these days. But we're going to be looking at color from a point of view of Munsell today. So that's value, the three kind of keys to color, the three aspects of color in Munsell are firstly value, which everybody knows, light to dark. Hue, which is the color family, is it a yellow, a green, a blue? And the third one is chroma. Now chroma is best thought of as a scale, and at one end you have very low chroma, which is gray, neutral you could say. At the other end you have very intense color. Some people call it bright color, but that's a little bit confusing then when you talk about values as well. It's light and dark or bright and dark. So it's better to talk about it in terms of chroma. I'm going to be talking about this a little bit more as we mix and choose the colors for the light and the shadow, okay? So once you have those basic skills developed, the other things that I think you need are knowledge and experience. And a lot of knowledge basically comes from experience anyway. But of those three things, I think skill is the most important. And thankfully, I believe anyway, it's the easiest of the three to develop. Okay, so I'm going to switch over. I'm going to turn this big light off. I'm going to switch over to the easel now. You can see my setup anyway. I've got an 8x10 gesso board ampersand panel on here. My palette is here, and we can get started. Hello Hugh, good to see you. And Romy is here. And Linda, nice to see you all. Let me switch over to, I've got to knock the big light off first and everything goes slightly dark for a second. And then we'll switch over to the easel. Okay. Hello Marilyn, nice to see you. Hi Anna. Renee is here as well, good to see you Renee. Martha is here. And Cindy, nice to see you all. And for anyone who hasn't been on one of these sessions before, this session today is not typical in some ways because it's mostly demonstration, so I'm going to be going reasonably quickly today. But of course you can watch this back as many times as you like later. So just to show you how I have things set up, here is the palette. So this is a top-down view from a camera up there, which goes down onto my palette, okay? So there will be a replay, absolutely. And over here on the easel is my panel. To the right there is a photo, but as you can see, it's overlaid over the stream, so I can't actually draw on it or anything like that, you know. But this is the photo that we're going to be working from today. So let's get started. So first thing to do is going to be to prepare the panel. So this is cold pressed linseed oil. You can use refined or whatever you like. Personally, I don't really know the difference. I use cold pressed because I think it's messed with less. The word refined puts me off. It's like, what have they done to it? You know, I don't know. So this is, what I have here is terps. You can use Gamsol or sand soda or anything you like. A little bit of that in there. So I'm probably mixing like 2 parts oil to 1 part solvent. But a lot of it depends on what your solvent is like and what your oil is like. We just cut it a little bit so it dries a little bit more quickly. And then the next thing to do is to get a brush you don't care about. I really don't care about this brush, which is a Rosemary's Hog, and cover the panel. Why are we doing this? Well, it basically enables the paint to go on a lot more smoothly, and it allows blending techniques and a more calligraphic kind of line with the brush, stroke with the brush. And it also means that as soon as you start working on the panel, you're basically working wet into wet. But you have to be very careful because if you put too much on, it's an absolute nightmare. It beads up, the paint goes all over the place, it doesn't cover. Michelle, yeah, this is an 8x10, yeah. Hello, Candy, nice to see you. Hi, Jeannie. Just like old times, yeah. And then you wipe it off, and you wipe most of it off. I think when people have problems with this method, it's usually because they haven't wiped enough off. Wipe a lot of it off. So the next thing to do is, because we're working from a photo, is to grid it up. Now here's a nice quick and easy way of doing this. So what I have mixed up here is just a little bit of raw umber, a little bit of ivory black and some white to a fairly light value. And this is how I usually do it. Like, if, you know, you can do it really easy this way. So find the middle, which is 5, 2.5. Won't it be embarrassing if I get the numbers wrong? And then divide it into 4, basically. And then the same this side. So this is 8. So that's 2, 4, and 6. And you could, I mean, there's no reason why you shouldn't use a ruler. Really isn't. I personally don't know. I just do one side and then I kind of do it like this. And it's useful, especially for demos like this, because it means I can get into the drawing very quickly. And if you are working from a photo, it's basically no different than gridding up a drawing and enlarging it, you know. Just helps you to get the basic. God, it's hard to do that and talk. get the basic structure in pretty quickly. So the way I'm going to paint this today is alla prima, but it's probably best thought of as like stage 1 or step 1 or layer 1 of a painting. Let me bring that exposure of that camera down, because when the panel is white like this, it gets a little bit blown out. Just so you can see what I'm doing with the drawing. The camera doesn't like a white panel. Okay, so my next job is to sketch out the rows. Now the first thing is to make sure that it's in the right place, right? So I'm always looking for the highest point, the furthest left point, and the furthest right. I'm going to start with the rows because it's the most important part. So the highest point is about here. The lowest point, you can pretty much see it crosses this vertical about halfway down, about there. That's the lowest point. The furthest left point is just inside this line. And the furthest right point is a little bit above halfway up here and probably about 2/3 towards the right. So that's basically how big the rose is going to be on the panel. So, you know, one of the main problems of drawing stuff out is already fixed. We know where it's going to be, okay? So if you then, from there, if you look at where the outline actually crosses the grid line, so if you've downloaded the photo, you can see it there on the screen. It comes back and it crosses this line about there. It crosses this line a little bit below the highest point about there. It crosses this line, little less than halfway along about there. Cross this one a little way in about there. And you can really, you know, you really quickly blocked out where it's going to be. So now is the interesting part, thinking about drawing it in. And for me personally, at this stage, I'm immediately thinking about the form, okay? So people who've done flower workshops or rose workshops with me before will have heard me say this a lot of times. You're like, oh yeah, we know what's coming. It's a cup on a saucer, basically. We have the frilly kind of the guard petals around the back, which are almost flat. And then we have this cup shape. So I want to know where the cup shape is as well. So I'm going to start by doing the left hand just with straight lines. I'm not bothered about putting in petals at the moment. I just want to know pretty much where things go. Straight line blocking. So the pressure that I've got with my brush is really light. You know, this is a flat 1/4 inch synthetic. The same one I always use basically for blocking out. It's a nice brush. So really about here is where the saucer starts. And it comes out around here. I'm just going to put a suggestion of where the petals are, but I don't want to get involved in trying to do an accurate drawing or trying to really replicate all of those petals, because I think at this stage, that's your enemy, trying to get into an accurate drawing and doing detail, because it's going to stop you thinking about the overall form. And what we want to do is simplify this right down into light and shadow, okay? Simplify it into the basic forms and then create light and shadow with them. So this is the top of the saucer. So the cup, actually, you just kind of have to judge this because it's not really all that clear. But for me personally, I would say the cup is like, if I squint right down, I feel like the edge of the cup stops about here. There are a couple of light petals in here where you can just see them poking up over this side, but they're mainly coming up out of shadow, okay? So if I'm thinking about my cup, it's kind of like this sort of shape. It almost goes straight down there, comes back up around here. So you could say that's the top of my cup, and then this is the side of my cup. So I'm trying to create a feeling of here is my saucer and here is my cup. Like this is the side of the cup here. But the cup is actually full because it's got petals inside it. Now the middle of the cup is going to be about here, okay? And that's kind of important to know because what actually happens is it is a cup, but it's got some stuff in it, but it's kind of scooped like this. And that affects how we paint it because it means the light is coming down from here. So this side is slightly in shadow and this side is slightly lighter. So if you look carefully at the petals that you can see here, they're slightly darker than the ones that are sticking up into the light on this side. Okay. It's very nice to see you too, Siham. I don't know if I pronounced your name right. You can tell me if I did or not. Okay, so that's basically what we need to do to get started. So this is all going to be light, this is going to be shadow, this is going to be shadow, but hang on. The shadow on here is a cast shadow. So the light comes down here, it hits the cup, and the cup casts a shadow onto the saucer. Okay? But there's a little bit of the saucer in light here. So I want to mark where the division between the light and the shadow is. And there's a little bit of the saucer here is in light as well. So I'm going to mark that. So that's light here, and this is the cast shadow here, which is cast by the cup. So right from the beginning, we're starting to think about what's light and what's shadow in very simplified terms. Does it make sense? Really, really important. If you're going to be able to paint something fairly quickly, it's really important to be able to simplify it right down. So I'm going to quickly rough out like where everything else is as well, like the leaves, you know. So I know I have a leaf here. The way I like to do leaves is that basically I start with the middle of it, the kind of the stem of the leaf, get that in the right place, and then paint the leaf around it. I'm not bothered about perfection of these shapes so much as I am with the rose, you know, as long as they're like leafy and in the right place, then they'll be all right. We've got a nice big one up here. And basically, for me, the exciting bit is when we've mixed the colors and then we start putting the colors down. So I want to get to that point as quickly as I can, you know. The cup analogy, I think it just works, you know. It really helps to take all of that difficult complexity and simplify it down. And the value of simplifying it down is it helps you to think about it in general terms of light and shadow. Another leaf here. And it gives you a way in to what is basically a very complicated form. I'm going to quickly rough in like where this other little flower is. I don't know if we'll get to it, the little flower today. Probably not. But at least I'm going to put something in there because I don't want any of the white panels showing. I want, you know, once I get to the block-in stage, I want all of the white panel covered because the problem with that is the white will throw out my perception of the values in the rest of the painting. So the human system of perception is extremely poor at judging value, right? It's why we have to train it. But I also have a nice little trick which I will show you shortly about figuring out what the values are. No spoilers from people who've done lots of flower workshops with me. You know what's coming. I'm going to get my Photoshop out. So I'm just kind of roughing in where these shapes go at the moment. I don't want to get too involved in them, partly because I might not get to them anyway today. You know, because there's my goal for today is to get as much knowledge across to you as I possibly can about how I approach this stuff. It's not necessarily to create a finished painting. Probably won't do in the time anyway. So I'm just kind of roughing in where these leaves go. And we'll see what happens. Just get an idea of where they are. Maybe take out my big arrow there. It's not really helping me much. Okay, and then we've got the vase, this exceptionally beautiful ginger jar that they're sitting in. So I'm just going to do a really like a rough idea of where that is. You can't see this edge of it because it's behind this leaf. All this area here is just really, really dark, so I'm not going to bother drawing out anything in there, really. Yes, the session is recorded and I will be emailing you a link tomorrow. How big is the rose? It's actually died now, but it was probably about that. Pretty much the size I'm painting it, not far off the size I'm painting it, to be honest with you. Okay, now comes the fun part. So I had a bit of a check with this rose earlier on, a little while ago actually, because this rose is long dead, to try and find out what the local color was. Now, by the local color, I mean the color something is independent of light and shadow. Okay, so for example, this rather beautiful jug that I keep my brushes in has a few different local colors. This cream color is the local color. Regardless of whether it's in shadow here or it's in light there, this is the local color. Also has an orange, which is a local color, and a green. But this cream color is affected by light and shadow, but I want to know what color this is regardless of the light and shadow. And the best way to do that is to mix a color and then hold it literally against the thing to find out what it is. Okay, so I did that with this rose that we're painting now a little while ago. And the local color of the petals was pretty much this. Now this is a Munsell chip. Okay. From the big Munsell book. And it comes from one of the pages. This one, which is, I mean, I can tell you what the number is of the page. It's 7.5 RP, but that doesn't mean an awful lot to you. It's just numbers, right? And letters. It's a red purple, tending slightly more towards red, okay? So I was talking about value, hue, and chroma. This is value from light to dark. These are all the same hue. They're all the same color purple, right? But this is low chroma, and this is high chroma. Intense, more gray, more gray, more gray. So most of the colors on this rose are actually pretty low chroma. But the interesting thing about it is you get higher chroma in the shadows. But this is the actual color of the petals. It's quite low chroma, okay? But I want to be able to paint light and shadow. So if I know that this is the local color, or maybe slightly higher, you know, chroma than that, like that would be the next chroma up, which would be this one there. I'm going to need light. So if I get the lightest color that I can get on this page, the hue doesn't change too much from light to shadow. It does a little bit, but I'm not going to go into that too much here. So there is pretty much the local color. If I wanted to go a little bit higher chroma, then that would be useful to have that ready to go with. I'm going to need a slightly darker one for when we start to move a little bit into the shadow. So this is like, you know, these come from halfway down the value of this page. So these are like a middle value when we start, like you could think of it as the half tone as we start to move into light and shadow. And then I'm going to need those deep shadows. Now look at this. Look how dark that looks against that panel. But that is pretty much the colors that we want to hit in the shadows. Okay. So I know there are a few Munsell people among you also who have the big book. So these are all 7.5 RP, okay? So this one is the value 9. There is only one chip up there because you can't get higher chroma than that. So these are value 7. That one's chroma 2 and that one's chroma 4. If you like, when I send out the link to the email for anyone who does Munsell stuffs like this, I'll put the actual colors in. So these are value 5, that's chroma 4 and that's chroma 6. because as we move down towards the shadow, the chroma goes up a little bit. So this is value 2, and that's chroma 6. These are all 7.5 RP. This is chroma 2, value 2. But look how dark those look, you know? Trust the chips. It'll be fine. Especially when you start to put these colours down, the dark ones, they look so dark against the panel. That's great to hear, Wonder Woman, yeah. Munsell is the stuff. It just makes a lot of, once you've been working with it a little while, it just makes a lot of things easier, okay? So I'm roughly organising these in terms of the chroma. So these are all close to grey, chroma 2. These are chroma 4, and these are chroma 6. The value is 2, 5, 7, and 9. So might not need all of those, but you know, I'm going to mix them anyway. Now this is the bit where I'm going to have to fly a little bit because frankly, it can take a very long time to mix those colours. So when I'm teaching a workshop, we go through this slowly. Or I send out a video beforehand so people can get their mixes right, okay? So we know, anyway, we know, hue-wise, we know we're in the 5 RP, 7.5 RP area. We're in the red purples, right? So let's start off with this one. So the value is really high. So I'm going to tell you now everything that I've got on my palette. Let me switch over to the palette so you can see this happening a bit, little clearer. I'm going to take the reference photo off for a minute as well. Brilliant, thanks Suzanne. Yeah, 7, 2, 4, 5, 4, 6, 2, 2, and 2, 6. I've got 2, 6 as well because we need to punch up the chroma in those shadows a little bit. So what have I got here? What has it got in its pockets? This is lead white. This is titanium white. May use that and may not. This is bright yellow lake, which is a greenish transparent yellow, an arylide yellow. I think the pigment is PY3. This is yellow ochre. This is quinacridone rose with a little rope of lead white over it because I opened my lead white earlier on and it just went everywhere. Oh, the mess. This is Winsor & Newton permanent magenta so that we can get the chroma right down the bottom of the value range, okay? So you could mix a lot of these colours just with quinacridone rose and ultramarine blue, which I have here. But the permanent magenta helps you hit the high chroma down the bottom in the shadows. This is Chroma, the best colour in the world. This is ivory black. Gasp. I'm sure some of you are gasping. You don't want ivory black on your palette, surely. Yes, you do. And I'll show you why when we're mixing. It has a specific function which is very useful for. Nothing else can do it. And this is a phthalo green. Now I've got Winsor & Newton Windsor green here. Yellow shade. It doesn't matter which phthalo green you use. And we're going to use that for the leaves. And we only use it a little bit. But let's say I want to mix this colour. I'm going to start with white because it's high value. Look how ropey this is. Look at that. Whoa. Nice. So I'm going to put in a very small amount of quinacridone rose, like a tiny, just a whisper. It's so easy to overdo this because I only want to go down like a tiny step. The value of this is only just above 9 anyway. I basically just want to add I suppose you could call it a tint if you were that way inclined. It's not a word I ever use though. I suppose I do use it sometimes when I talk about tinting strength. And the tinting strength of quinacridone rose is very high, you know. Let's check that. By the way, there is a way that you can, even if you don't have a Munsell book, if you get hold of one of these, which is a Munsell scale, turn it the right way around. So if you search on eBay for Paul Kentore Munsell value scale, C-E-N-T-O-R-E. If anyone wants to be really helpful and stick a link to that in the chat, that would be fantastic. So I know that I want value 9, which is up here. So you can actually follow the recipes that I use, nail the values, and you'll get most of the way there. So that's nearly there, but I actually put in, even with the tiny amount I put in a little bit too much. I'm going to take some out and put in a little bit more white to bring it back up a little bit. Quinacridone rose is very powerful. and that'll do it. So if you just took lead white, or even titanium white actually, and mixed it with a tiny little bit of quinacridone rose to make sure the value is right, which you can use this scale to do, because it's laminated. Hello Margie, good to see you. Then, you know, you get the same color as me. So the next one down, I'm going to go for the higher chroma one first, right? So this is value 7. This is going to be interesting because I need to come down a little bit in the value, okay? So most of these colors are surprisingly towards red, side of red purple. So I'm going to bring in a very small amount. Do it carefully, a bit at a time, until I bring it down to that value that I want there. And when I do, because all I've got in here is quinacridone rose and white, the chroma is going to be really high, right? This is actually one of the things that the Munsell book is very useful for, because I think I've dropped the value too far there. So if I get the Munsell book up for this page, I can pretty much check the value that I've got. Like, so I want value 7, right? If I go to the highest chroma I can, actually I'm about right. Can you see that? If I put a little dab on there, you basically can't see it. So the value is right. But look, the chroma is way too high. I need to drop the chroma. Complement mixing, I hear someone say. Goodness gracious, no. So anyone who's here, again, who's done workshops with me or anything like that, live sessions with me before, knows my favorite color for dropping chroma is raw umber. But I'm not just going to stick it in there. It would completely destroy it, right? I'm going to get some raw umber and I'm going to mix it with white up to the same value. This is crucial. Even if you don't do Munsell, you know, if you mix color like this and you make sure that everything is the same value when you mix it, it's going to make your life so much easier. I'm not kidding you. Always mix value to value. So I'm going to get that to the same value. And if you want to, you can check it's the same. So this is the beauty of working with a set value scale like this. Also incredibly handy when I'm teaching, because it means regardless of the screen you've got and what you see, if you have one of these value scales, you can absolutely check your value. You know, that's slightly dark. A little bit more white. Now I know because I've mixed this color a few times, but if I just mix those two together, it's going to go a little bit too far towards kind of red orange. So I'm also going to need a black, ivory black, and I'm going to bring this up to the same value as well with white. All got to be the same value. This is the lead white I'm using at the moment. Basically, I use it because I like the way it goes onto the panel. But I'm going to have to put some more out soon, which I'm dreading, frankly, because it's Rublev. I've had the tube a long time and it's separated. The paint is separated in the tube. And I tried to put some out earlier on and I just got a big squidge of oil all over the place. And then it's just started running out in a long rope and it literally went everywhere. Okay, so I've got 3 colors mixed there, all of the same value. This is difficult to judge if you don't have like an independent check like the Munsell book. Not impossible, but you know, you can still get pretty close. So what I want is like this chroma here. No, this one, sorry. So that really does look, is that a value 8? No, it's a 7, you see. Perception is a tricky thing. So if I take some of that, I can use the raw umber to start bringing down the chroma. And you can hopefully see that's getting me pretty close already. But it swung the hue a little bit with it having raw umber in it. So I'm going to want to put a little bit of the black in it as well. Now I've dropped the chroma a little bit too far. I'm sure the value is dropping a little bit too far. Maybe I didn't check the value of my black mix. I think I probably didn't. Yeah, it's a bit dark, so I'll bring some white into it. Bring the value back up to where it wants to be. It just makes it a lot easier if you have like a reference like this to keep you on track. That's pretty much bang on, okay? So let's bung this over here. So I'm gradually going down the palette from light to dark. And I tend to arrange my paints in terms of chroma as well, so I know where I am. But I want a lower chroma version as well. I'm actually going to put some white in straight away because I know that's going to come out too dark. So an even lower chroma version of that just means putting a little bit more of the raw umber and the black mix in. So I'm after this one now. Looks like way too much raw umber, so I'm going to scoop a bunch of that out, put more black in, and bring some more of this in. That's more like it. And the reason I like to have a bit of a range of chroma like this is because it just gives me really fine control over the color. So if I start putting it down and I decide the chroma is too high, it's really easy for me to drop it whilst I'm painting with this color here. That looks good to me. So this is my light. This is my local, you know, so the lightest parts of the rose are going to be up here. Most of the light part is going to be around here, you know. I'm going to keep these because they're going to help me mix the next colors that I need as well. So now I'm going down into what you could call the half tone as we move from the light towards the shadow. I want these two colors here. So this at the moment, if I put a dab of that on there, you can see it's quite a lot lighter, right? So this needs to come down a long way in value. So I'll put a fair amount of quinacridone rose in there. I haven't actually used the permanent magenta yet, which will swing it more towards blue. And the reason for that is when I drop the chroma with the black, ivory black is basically a blue. Okay, that value looks pretty good to me. Again, if you do have either the student book or the big book, you can check it. So we're in value 5 here, which is along here. So let's see, like the chroma might be, it's more like up here. Yeah, the value's good. It's slightly, very slightly dark. Oh, wrong white. So I'll put a little bit of white in and bring it back up a little bit. So I know this must seem like, God, you spend a lot of time mixing before you do any painting. But there's a good reason for that. Because most of painting happens here on the palette. Sorry, I'm a little bit behind the chat. I do like mixing. Oh, thank you so much for putting that in, Leader. Brilliant. Jenny says, I wanted to know more about the choice of smooth surface of a panel versus linen or canvas. If that was a personal choice or there was a reason for the panel choice. Just personal choice, Jenny. I use these ampersand ones for demos because they're cheap. Frankly, no more romantic reason than that, I'm afraid. So these two, I'm going to keep them, but these want to come down in value 2 to the same value, value 5. Yeah, so I use them because they're cheap. But what I do if I'm going to do an actual painting on them is I oil prime them. So they're quite a nice, a good too far. They're quite a nice surface. They're quite a nice panel, you know. As long as you stay for the smallish sizes, they don't warp. But I like oil primed, so I would tend to oil prime them. What I do a lot is I buy oil primed panels, and they're so stingy with the oil primer. They really are. So I put another coat on, and I put it on with this, like a trowel, and smooth it out, and you get this beautiful slick surface, but with a bit of a texture to it as well. Let's check this value. I want this to be value 5, so I can use my little value scale here to check it. Yeah, it's all right. Close enough for me. So I'm going to try and mix both of these. Like here's the high chroma one. Here's the lower chroma one. Keep them the right way around, huh? So we'll go for the higher chroma one first because it's easier to drop chroma than it is to add it. Start off with a bit of this. I'm going to bring in mostly the black to start with and begin to drop the chroma down. Dropped it a bit too far maybe. Let's see. Because then this has gone too blue now. I don't want to add more chroma, but if I bring in a bit of the raw umber, it will swing the hue back the way I want it to go. Hue looks good. Chroma is a little low. I think it's dropped in value again. So I'm going to bring in a bit of white. Too much. So I'm just taking a bit from each of these piles, depending on, like, really, I'm doing this quickly, obviously, but I'm looking at the color and I'm thinking, where does it need to go? Is the chroma too high? Is the value right? Has it gone too blue? Good. Can drop the chroma a little bit too much. I'm going to bring a little bit of that in, and it's a little bit blue, so I'm going to bring a bit of the raw umber in, and that'll do nicely. And then I'm going to do a lower chroma one as well, so I'll bring in less of that. I know I'm going to need some white. I think it's the black. It felt like a bit of the brown as well. It felt like it was the right value, but I'm not so sure now. So this is chroma, and it's going to be important later when we want to show the difference between light and shadow, and also crucially where we want to show light traveling through the petals. Oh, I dropped it too far. Bring in a bit more. You can see, like, hopefully the level of control you have. Now, basically what I'm doing here is this approach to mixing is a skill that needs to be learned and practiced. You absolutely can learn it, and you can get really quick with it as well. But at first it takes a little bit of time because it feels unfamiliar, I know. All right. So I've got a lot of the way that I need to get now. I'll keep those back just in case I want to use them later, but I probably won't. But who wants to throw paint away, right? So what I want now is the shadow, the deep shadow. Let me catch up really quickly on the comments. Hello, Susan. Nice to see you. You're very welcome, Roberta. CM says, maybe we should mix a bigger amount so we don't have to mix again. Totally. Totally. Make sure you mix enough. And apart from anything else, if you don't mix enough, you tend not to put enough paint on the panel. And, you know, that's one of the biggest beginner problems that I see is people not using enough paint. So it gets really thin on the panel. You worry it around too much and it loses the depth of the color. You know, it really does. And also you can't get the blending techniques if you don't have enough paint. It's very difficult to control your edges. Judy says, what oil primer do you use when preparing canvas or panels? I use Michael Harding. What's it called? Foundation White, because I bought a huge drum of it, like a huge can of it years ago, and I've still got it. Okay, Jenny, probably will still be here in a little while. Hope it goes all right. Hello, Vicky, good to see you. Hi, Joanne. Let me just have a quick look. Oh, look at this. There's loads of chat on the YouTube as well that I'm not keeping up with. Hello, everybody who's on YouTube. It's a little bit difficult for me because I'm trying to paint, like mix color and talk and watch two different sets of chat at the same time. So, but I will very much try to keep up with any questions on YouTube as well. Barry, it's very nice to meet you. You too, Judith. Okay, let's get back to it. So most of it's done now, right? So I want to mix these now this is tricky because I want to mix, I want I don't want paint on that. I want high chroma, very low value. So this is about as low as you can go. Like, you know, on the Munsell book, this is right down here. Like this chip goes here. Total light goes there. And then I got one that goes there and one that goes there. So it's an interesting point about color, right? So this hue hits its highest chroma right in the middle of the value range, just a little bit higher than quinacridone rose, which is really close in hue to this. If this were a yellow, it would hit its highest value up here. If it were a dark blue, if it were a blue like ultramarine or something, it would hit its highest value down here. This color hits its highest, chroma, this hits its highest chroma there. So as we go down the value range, the chroma drops. So it can be difficult to keep the chroma that you want in the shadow. So I'm going to mix two. I'm going to mix the chroma 6 one and the chroma 2 so I can control it. Now the chroma 6 one, if I just get, I'm going to clean this up so I don't get any of these colors in the next color that I mix. If I just get this Winsor & Newton permanent magenta, right, and just stick it on there, hopefully you can see it's pretty close. It's slightly too dark. So what if I get some of this and add a little bit of white? I'm out. Oh, now it's going to be fun. Let's see what's going to happen with this. I've had it, basically these tubes of Rublev lead white, if anyone's got any, when it starts to separate out at the beginning of the tube and you get all the oil and all the pigment is at the bottom, if you stand them like that for a while, it usually sorts it out. So let's see if I've stood it for long enough. Come on, be nice. Yeah, it's all right. Phew. Let's squidge out a load of this. I love lead white. I like it for flowers especially. So when this stuff is the right consistency, it's gorgeous. When it's separated out, it's horrible. Little bit of lead white. And if I just bring this up to the right value with a small amount of white, the chroma is going to be high. It's probably, I may even beat that chip. I'm going to need more of this. I don't have enough. Where have I put it here? Winsor & Newton permanent magenta. There are lots of different magentas you can use, quinacridone magentas and stuff like this. I'm not sure what's the pigment in this one. Interesting, the pigment in this is PV19 and the pigment in the quinacridone rose is also PV19. So I actually get asked this quite a lot. If I use a different tube paint with the same pigment, will it be the same color that you've got? No, it won't. If it comes from a different manufacturer, because I don't know enough about paint making and science to tell you why, but it will be different. Okay, so that is about the right value. It's just a little bit too high chroma. Higher chroma than the highest chroma chip in the big book, which is pretty impressive. You know, well done, Winsor & Newton. I'm quite impressed with you. Winsor & Newton is actually pretty nice paint a lot of the time, you know. But say I definitely do want to make a lower chroma version as well. So if I get the black, I'm effectively just going to add white to this, but I'm going to just use a bit of this because this is just black and white. Bring it to a value 2, because ivory black out of the tube is like a value 0.5, even lower than 1. The reason I'm just using the black at the moment is because it looks a little bit too far towards red to me. So I'll check it for value, too dark, a bit more white. You can see like this paint is going all over the place on my palette, these little ropes. They can actually be useful to paint with, but it takes a bit of controlling. So this is basically how I'm going to, this is how you drop chroma with a lower chroma color of the same value. So I'm using the ivory black here because the ivory black is basically a blue, and this is looking a bit too red. So if I take my ivory black and I put in a little bit of this, value to value, remember. I don't want to take too much out of it because I'll have to mix some more. Now that looks way, way dark. It is really dark. And you know, if I put this on the panel, I'll put some on there just as a kind of just to show you. That's a bit too low in value, so I'm going to bring it up a little bit more white. It's so difficult when you paint on a straight white panel. It's so difficult to judge the values. That's why people often tone their panels. I often don't, and the reason I don't is because that'll do. So that's a Chroma 2, and this is about a Chroma 6. Might need to mix a bit more of that, we'll see as we go. But it was pretty easy mix anyway. You know, so all I've done is I've mixed a bunch of colours, all of the same hue. If I was being finicky, I would be changing the hue a little bit as I go, but I want to keep this fairly simple, okay? And also I want to get a point across that a lot of people say, you know, the colour changes an awful lot from the hue changes a lot from the light to the shadow. It does, but a bit, only a bit. Jenny says, what do you recommend as a substitute for lead white? I'm not aware that there is one. You can get it in the USA though. You can get it. Titanium white is a completely different kind of paint. Thanks, Susan. Yeah. Ariana, they are gorgeous, these colours. You're going to be painting them soon. They're absolutely beautiful. Subtle. Subtle. Okay. So I'm going to do a little bit more mixing on the fly as well, which I'm going to be doing fairly quickly, but these are like the core colours that I needed, all right? And incidentally, another useful thing about this is that if I wanted to go back to another session on this painting, being as I'm working from a photograph, I could leave it like a year and then mix exactly these colours again using these chips. That's pretty useful. And another little aside on warm and cool while I'm here, okay? Which of these would you say is warmer and which is cooler? I mean, this one is warmer and that one's cooler, right? But they're the same hue. Like people usually think of warm and cool in terms of hue, like blue is cool. So, you know, say you're trying to make a flesh tone cooler as it turns towards the shadow like you see the old masters do. A lot of the time, you know, you might be tempted to mix in blue, but a lot of the time it is not the hue that changes, it's the chroma. And this approach to colour allows you to change the chroma, which is the warmest and which is the coolest of these. This one looks cool next to this one. You know, if I get an even higher chroma one out, of the same value, remember, the same hue, you know, that looks positively scorching next to this. This looks cold. They're the same hue. They're both the same red-purple. The only difference between them is the chroma. So warm and cool, one of the reasons I don't like to talk about warm and cool too much, if I can avoid it, there are times when it makes sense to talk about it, I think, but mostly not, because a lot of the time when people are seeing what they call a temperature change, what they're seeing is a change in chroma, you know. Where are we? Where are we up to? Let's bring this back up. Here's our panel. Bring the reference photo back up. You're very welcome, Jean-Luc. I'm just catching up with the YouTube chat now. That does sound a messy way to sort it out. Olaf, it was good to see you. I'll see you later. Oh, my chat isn't keeping up, I'm sorry. Gamblin has flake white, apparently, yeah. Flake white, lead white, all the same thing. Michael Harding, warm white is a substitute. I doubt if it will handle quite the same. Roberta says, showing the palette is everything. It totally is. Most of painting happens here, you know. Most of it happens there. So just for giggles, although what I would usually do next in a painting is I would do the background first, so I start to key the painting and get all that right. I'm just going to pick up, I'm going to mix between these two because I'm not really sure exactly what chroma I'm going to want. I'm going to mix between these two. So the value is 2, remember, it's right down the bottom of the value scale. So here's my value scale. The value of this is right down here. And just to show you how much a white panel throws your eye out, this is going to go in the shadows. Oh, you would never put that down. You'd think it was way too dark, right? It's way too dark. But I think you'll find when we get to that bit, it will be all right. Trust me, I'm professional. It'll be fine. The background. Now, let me show you something about how I work out values when I'm working from a photo. Okay. So I'm going to do a quick screen share now of Photoshop. So here is the photo in Photoshop, right? And I've also got a grayscale version of it here. Let me bring that down a bit. With a scale down the side here. Now this scale replicates the Munsell scale pretty closely. So this is the middle value, 5. So you've got 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's actually 9.5 and that's 0.5, but let's not quibble. So if I wanted to know what the value of the background was, if I click on it, if I get the little pipette color checker thing, and I set it to, I usually have it on an 11 by 11 average here, and if I click on the background, it's all right, big lad.
What?
All right.
Yeah.
I'm live.
What?
It's all right.
Well.
What is it?
Since you're live, I get it after that 11 pounds of Robux. Premium.
Haven't you checked? I've already got you some Robux for your birthday.
But not the premium.
What? You didn't think it was enough? Listen, I got to do what I'm doing.
Okay, I can buy me the premium. Also,
what? But you already had quite a lot of birthday presents today, dude.
You promised me.
Did I?
Yes, Dad. Remember?
I can't remember that. Still, you've got a better memory than me.
Yes, you did.
Let me teach. I'll see you later, okay? It's his birthday, it's 8 today. Sorry about that. So I click on there, and if I open up this little thing here, of course it comes up on the wrong screen, so I'll just pull it over. You see this value here, the L value, that corresponds to the scale. So if I click on the Munsell scale, like here is 4, sorry, there is 4, that's exactly 40, right? 5 is exactly 50. If anybody wants this scale, by the way, I'll send out a link to it in the email. So then I can check, like if I want to find out what values I want these to be, like over here it's a bit darker, it's like a little bit below 4. Over here it's a little bit lighter, slightly above a value 4, right? Really interesting stuff to know, very, very useful. Okay. Just a little aside there for how you can use Photoshop in conjunction with the Munsell scale. Don't encourage him, he'll be back in a minute. Oh dear, we have our usual Foxton routine of cake for breakfast. I don't know why we started doing that, but at some point we all started having cake for breakfast on our birthdays. So I know the value that I want, it's between, there's a value 4, 3.5 and 4.5. So I want to be like a bit below 4 there and a bit above 4 there. It's very close to neutral. So the way that I would mix this color, raw umber, the best color in the world, start off with this. Now I want to make sure that I mix enough, okay? Because I've got quite a lot to cover. Breakfast cake is absolutely the best. Yes, please, for the value scale. Okay, I will try to remember to send a link to a download of the scale. If I forget, poke me. I'm going to bring in a little bit of white. Now, raw umber is a good example of something that is a weak tinter, and so is lead white. So we've got two whites, two colors here, both of which are weak tinters. Titanium white is very, very powerful. Will overpower a color, bring the value up very quickly. It's also opaque. Not up to a 4 yet. We're going to want a bit more. So this at the moment is just raw umber. Overshot a bit there. So I'm going to do a black version as well, because raw umber by itself is going to be a little bit too much chroma, I think. So let's get plenty of black out there and bring some lead white in up to about a value 4. Ooh, there's a thick bit of lead white in there. That's weird. Because I want something between the two. I don't just want the black and white, because that would be slightly bluish. But the raw umber by itself will end up being almost the same chroma as the rose. And this is a compositional thing, but I want the chroma of the background. Let's check my value. I want the background to be lower chroma than the rose, even though the rose is already quite low chroma. It's way too dark. It needs to come up quite a bit. Because even when I have a low chroma subject like this rose, I'll usually drop the background to be a lower chroma than the subject. And that's in the setup. So when I took this photo, I used one of my lowest chroma backdrops behind it. All right, that's pretty good. That's like about a value 4. So if I start off with my darker version there, Victoria says, do you just use the scale as a layer over the image? Yes, you can. And I'm going to show you in a second how I do that. So I check it when I'm mixing with it on the palette, and then I also use it on the painting, because some funny stuff can happen between the palette and the painting. Okay. So I'm going to start bringing in the raw umber mix until I'm happy. So visually, I'm looking at the colors that I've got mixed here, and I'm looking at the chroma that I'm mixing here for my background. And I want to make sure that I don't add too much chroma, but just the black and the ivory black and the lead white on its own, I think would be a little bit too blue. That I'm happy with. Let's get all of that out of the way. Have I got enough? Probably not. Let's mix some more. You really need to make sure you've got enough background color, because you want it not only when you lay the background down, but also when you get further through the painting. I use it personally, the background color, to sculpt the edges, to refine the edges of things, to get hard edges where I want them, and also to refine the drawing. So I want to make sure I've got plenty of background mix, like a big wodge. Wodge is a technical term for a large splodge. Splodge is slightly smaller than a wodge. For your background, you really want a wodge. Bit more raw umber. Now this is basically, I'm just choosing this purely for compositional reasons. You know, I'm not trying to match the photo. I want to get the value bang on, but I can mess a bit with the value, you know. Okay, so for my background brush, I'm going to use a large-ish flat hog. Now this is a Cornelison's brush. It's absolutely lovely. Size 8. If you wanted to know in inches, it's like probably about, across the ferrule is just over ½ an inch, about 3/4 of an inch. Get a bit of oil on it. I always do this right, with a fresh brush, right, when I'm painting. And then wipe it off, because I don't want to paint with the oil on there. I just want to work it in. Wodge is absolutely on the Pomberite vocabulary list. We have a bit of, I should tell everybody else who's watching, we have a bit of a running joke for people who do workshops with me of this vocabulary list, because I tend to come up with made-up words to describe things. And a Pomberite is someone who basically comes to my workshops and paints with raw umber a lot, because I do. So this is about the middle of the value range, just below. It's about here, okay? But look how dark it looks when it goes down. Oh my word. Oh my word, that looks dark. You wouldn't start with a color that dark, okay? But I promise you, by the time we get to the relevant part of the painting, like the rose and everything is filled in, this value is going to look right. And I like to put it on pretty brushy. And I'll pretty much control the value with the brush. Hang on just a second. Okay, good boy. Sorry, that was a bit distracting. So this, I think this is probably going to be okay. I'm going to go around the edges of the rows. Is anybody painting along with me today, by the way? Let me know in the chat if you are. So at this point, really, once we start to paint, my goal is to get the panel covered. I want to be able to see how all of the colors that I've decided on and that I'm mixing are going to work. And as long as there is any area of white which has not been filled in yet, that's going to be difficult for me to do. So we're going to need to mix the greens of the leaves as well, obviously. But the next thing we're going to put in, once we've got this, a bit more of this done, is the rose. So we must be coming up to about an hour, I suppose, by now, maybe a little bit more. But this is certainly would be pretty normal for me to spend this much time just on working things out, drawing out, deciding on the colors, mixing them, you know. But it basically means that when you get to the next bit, it's mostly a case of making sure that you put the color down in the right place, and it tends to go much quicker than, say, other direct painting methods. Oh great, quite a few people painting along. Yeah, the recording is definitely easier, but it can sometimes be a good idea to do both, you know, paint along. Because then, you know, if that brings up any questions that you want to ask, you can ask them straight away while I'm here. And lost my drawing a little bit there. And then have another bash later, you know. So that's looking pretty dark at the moment. It looks slightly darker on the screen because I've dropped the exposure of the camera as well, so bear that in mind. Ruchika says, how to check the color if we are using the Munsell chip on a laptop or tab screen. I tried, but the glare of the screen makes it impossible to check if it matches. It absolutely does. To the best of my knowledge, you can't do it unless you've got quite a lot of independent light falling on the chip itself. You can't do it. But now I haven't tried it yet, but my friend Richard Murdoch has just brought out a digital Munsell thing, which you can use on your phone. I've just been too busy to try it out, but it sounds very interesting. Is anybody here using Richard's digital Munsell thing? Let me know how you're finding it. Martha says, I'm painting but lagging. Yeah, I am going at a bit of a clip today. So, Tiffany says, did you mix the black and raw umber mixes together for the background? Yes, I did. More of the black mix and a little bit of the raw umber mix. Same value all over. Not quite. Almost, but I've painted it a little bit thicker on this side and I've let it go a little bit thinner over here, and that's going to raise the value a little bit on the other side. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Maybe have a chat with Richard about it if there's a he might be able to help you with if you're having some problems with it. Okay, so now we're kind of on to the interesting part. By the way, if I was just painting this for myself, number one, I would have got here quicker because I wouldn't be gassing so much while I paint. But also, I would do the leaves next. I would do all of the background. Like I'd fill all of this in before I do the rose. But so you don't have to wait too long to see what happens next. I'm going to bring the rose in now. In really, really simplified form. So brush I'm going to use for this. I'm going to use two, one for light and one for shadow. They are, I've lost one. Where's the other one gone? There's one. Oh, right, because I got some paint on it just now. So that's going to be my darks brush. These are Rosemary's Angled Eclipses. So you know what I was saying earlier on about how I intensely dislike Rosemary's Hogs? These, however, are lovely. You know. Right, Ruchika says, I was doing a master copy and I was trying to match the right colours. Yeah, I haven't found a way to do that, to be honest with you. But what I would suggest is if you have Photoshop, you can put an adjustment layer on it, a black and white layer, or grayscale it, and then check the values as I was showing you, and then at least you'll know your values are bang on. You know. Ruchika, if you have my email address, send me an email and let me know what it is that you're working on. I'd be interested to hear more about that. Okay, so I'm going to start with, this is my light brush. So I'm going to get some oil on the brush first, and then I'm going to wipe it off. I just do this to work the brush in so it goes a little bit easier. Now, the interesting thing about, I'm going to start with the inside of the cup. We're going to paint from the left over to the right, just because. Gassing. Oh, gassing means talking a lot. Sorry. Yeah. Gail says, why would you do the leaves next? Because then it makes it easier for me to judge the colours of the rows when they go down. Because at the moment, I don't have anything right at the bottom of the scale, which the leaves are, the value scale, right? So, cup. Light is coming down this way, okay? So that means this side is going to be slightly in shadow because it's indented, basically, in the middle. This side is going to be slightly in shadow and this side is going to be slightly more in the light, okay? Obviously, we need to create forms within those, but we're just trying to make it really, really basic at the moment. So if I get my lightest light that I mix, this is like the value 9, and that would be around here. So basically, I'm not trying to paint that rose as it really is right now. I'm trying to create a feeling of light and shadow to see if I've got the overall values and the colors right, and then I'll refine it into the rose, if that makes sense. So on the other side of it, I want to go slightly darker. So I'm going to go mix from my 7 a little bit over towards my 9. So I'm probably going to end up going in with like a little bit higher than a 7 over this side. And this is also partly to remind me to treat the form in this way, you know, because my hues are right, and I've carefully controlled the chromas, I should be able to get a feeling of light and shadow in something that won't feel much like a rose, but will feel like it's consistent in light in terms of light and shadow. So it's slightly darker on the left-hand side. So around here, this is the shadow side of the cup, so I need to get my darks brush out. Oh, thank you, Andor. I think there's something called Babel color as well, which you can use. So let's be bold with the shadow color. We're going down. I'm going down to value 2, and I'm mixing between the value 6 and the value the chroma 6 and the chroma 2. Sorry. Because I don't want to go in with too high chroma or too low, because I'm not really too sure where I'm going to want the chroma to sit. Probably slightly higher here, slightly higher chroma here, and that's because there's light traveling through the petals, which will create more chroma. This is going to look dark going on, you know. Because I'm putting it on against a dark background, against a white ground, sorry. You can still see some of the light. So I'm thinking in I'm not even looking at the petals, you know, I'm thinking in very, very simplified terms at the moment. So over here, I think we have slightly lower chroma, so I'm going to go a little bit more towards the low chroma version. And I'm just going to paint all of this as shadow as well, up to the point where the light started to show. So this is the saucer now. I'm trying to make sure that it goes in roughly the right place, but I'm not actually bothering too much about creating petals at the moment. And if I was to do this, even for myself, if I was to do this without judging it first, I would almost certainly be going in way too light here. So that's the end of the shadow. And then the source around here is back into the light, so I'll switch to my light brush. I'm going to go around here with my value 7, mixed a little way up into the 9. So pretty much the same as I have here, because there's full light on this part of the rose here. And I want a hard edge here against the background, because that's a light plane against the background. So I want to make sure I have a hard edge. Okay. And it's also around the top of the next area of the saucer. But here, where the shadow meets the light, this wants to be a soft edge. So I'm just going to brush over that a little bit and soften that edge. I'm also going to soften this edge between the side of the cup and the saucer there, because there would be a little bit of cast shadow there too. So I'm thinking about how the edges are going to create the form. So in shadow, it's soft, but here I want a very, very hard edge, because here I have a hard form, an edge of a form in the light against the shadow. So I want to keep a hard edge there. And then it gets light again out here. So I want a soft edge going into the shadow. Now all of this is going to be refined. At the moment I'm just trying to get a very general kind of idea of light and shadow in. So now I can probably bring the exposure of the camera a little bit back up, because there's less white showing. If I can do it without getting my head in the way, that would be a big help. So I'm going to try and bring it up so that they match the value of the background. So you can see the colours a little bit more clearly as they go down. That should be okay. Light and shadow. Doesn't look like much at the moment, I know. But also we have a lot of white stuff around here, so I want to start taking some of that out. So I'm going to mix some greens now. Now I have a basic approach for greens, which works incredibly well, and it's pretty simple once you get used to it. Ivory black is basically a blue, right? So if I get some ivory black out, and then you want a greenish yellow, a transparent greenish yellow, for which I use bright yellow lake. And the ivory black pretty much overpowers it, but that's fine because I want to be right down the value range for the most shadowy areas. And it basically makes a green, which makes sense because we've got a green yellow and a black. So value-wise, you know, I can put quite a bit of yellow in this and it will still be right down the bottom of the range, the value range. The only problem with it is that it's a little bit towards yellow. So to bring it back towards a slightly bluer green, I bring in a very, very small amount, like that much, of the phthalo. Let's see how that looks. A bit more. So some roses, the leaves go more towards a blue-green, and some they go more towards a yellow-green. And how much of the phthalo you put into this mix gives you the kind of the choice of which way you swing it. I think that's probably about right. So I always do this bit pretty much by eye. And then I take a little bit out and mix in a lot more of the green. So this is mixing up a lighter value now. Mixing a lot more of the yellow, sorry. But this is going, the more of the green yellow you put in, obviously the more towards yellow it goes. So in value terms, I'm bringing this up to probably about a 4. And then I'm going to bring in a little bit of phthalo again, because it's gone too yellow. Need to be a little bit more careful how much I put in now. and that brings it back towards a blue-green. But what happens with leaves as they go up into the light is that they drop in chroma. So I'm also going to want just black. And white. Bring it up to about the same value. Look at that big rope I just got right across my palette. So I can now mix between these on the fly to bring the chroma down of that lighter green. I'm going to bring up the value of this a little bit with some white as well. So I've got like a very dark, almost like a value 1 green, but with a bit of chroma in there. I've got a lighter one, and I've got a lighter one of about the same value, but basically almost no chroma. Just black and white. So I can mix between these to drop the chroma. So I'm going to choose a brush for my leaves. I'm going to use this, which is a Winsor & Newton Scepter Gold Series 606. This is a 1/2 inch. Get a bit of oil on it. And start putting in the leaves. So what I'm mostly trying to get to here is a point where I can see the full value range, okay? So I can use these very low value leaves down here to start sculpting the forms as well, you know. So I can use this to refine the outer edges of the rose here. So this petal would come around there, then it comes back out again. Comes around like that. So hopefully you can see, like, as soon as that goes down, because it's such a low value, you start to feel this shadow color slightly differently. It seems lighter. Your soft synthetics are best for this because it covers much better. And as soon as the green goes in right down the bottom of the value range, it creates a very different feel to the overall panel. You know, it changes how you perceive all of the values. Like the background now looks way lighter than it did. And it's not really until we get a good feeling of light and shadow in here. If you can hear some whirring in the background, it's Jasper. He got I probably shouldn't have done it. I got him one of those radio controlled cars that will go through anything. He's supposed to take it outside, but of course he's destroying the house with it instead. Slightly lighter down here. So I'm really just roughing in, you know, but it redefines everything when this starts to go in. All around here, like this, I can bring this leaf in. I just want to get as much of the panel covered as possible with the right values in the right place so I can start to assess the balance. And look how the feeling of the rose is changing. It is just a cup in a saucer, a purple cup in a saucer at the moment. But the more I refine these, the more it's starting to look like something that could actually be there and real. All of this area here, it's all green. I can't actually differentiate very easily what's happening there, so I'm just going to fill this. Couple of leaves over here. So me personally, the way I do this kind of thing, especially at this stage, is I'm not trying to create perfect versions of these leaves. I just want something that is roughly leaf shaped and is the right value in the right place. I am going to do some controlled smearing shortly. A little bit of that. Okay, so that's my greener leaves. Incidentally, what I was saying about as you go up the value range, it drops chroma. If I get some of this ivory black mix it with a little bit of the green, just a little bit, and then bring in some white, that will be pretty much perfect. A bit more grey for the kind of the highlighty parts where it gets much lighter in this leaf over here. It won't really show at the moment because I don't have the colour behind it mixed. That's basically, highlights on leaves work really well that way. This one is slightly lighter on this side. Yeah, not doing breaks today, Susan, I'm afraid. I'm just gonna keep going. Oh dear, you make me laugh. Let me check the YouTube chat quickly. Yes, I will post it. You've got, for those of you who are on YouTube, you're going to need to subscribe to my site. So if you look for Paul Foxton Learning to See and subscription, it should take you to the subscription page. Search for that in Google, and you should be able to find it. And then I ought to be able to send you out the scale there. Otherwise, I won't be able to. I'll put a link in the description actually of the YouTube video as well. Thank you, Ryan. That's good to hear. So an interesting thing about these, they're eucalyptus leaves. The other leaves that are in this composition are eucalyptus leaves. So I'm going to approach those mostly with black and white. So I've got my black and my white mix here. I'm going to mix a higher value version as well. I'm not going to go into too much detail on this. Like, you know, obviously for those of you who are in the workshop, I will be going into a lot more detail on this in that. But it's a much lower chrome, much more blue-green. So if I bring a little bit of the phthalo, and I have to be careful I don't, like I just did there, I brought up the chroma too far, so I have to bring in some more of the black and white to bring it back down. It's much bluer, and it's very, very low chroma, the eucalyptus. So that affects the light and shadow. I just want to be able to kind of rough that in as well so I can see where it is. Yeah, so if anyone is confused by what I was talking about, then when I teach workshops, we usually have a break on the hour for a cup of tea and stuff. And they're also like generally longer sessions than this. So this should be just about, it needs to be a little bit lighter there. Let's have a lighter version as well. Should be about the right chroma and value, a little bit above the background. I'm just going to rough this in for now because I want to really just have something established there. Just to note the colours more than anything so I can see what's going to happen in this part of the painting, and so that I don't have any white panel throwing off my perception of the values. You can see hopefully as gradually bit by bit you cover the panel. It begins to change your perception of the colours that are on there. So everything that you see in terms of colour is affected by what's around it, which obviously can make life pretty difficult when you're trying to judge values and colours. If not nigh on impossible sometimes. So I'm mostly roughing in these areas at the moment because I want to have these parts of the panel covered. So I'm not going to, I'm going to leave these parts very sketchy. I won't be going into any detail on these. If I was going to be finishing the painting, then I would work on them more. What we're really after at this point, what I'm after is to if you, as I'm painting this, as I'm putting these values down, I'm squinting right down. So I'm not really looking too much at what I'm painting. I'm looking at the painting as a whole and trying to kind of discern the value balance, if you like. So these parts, probably if I decided to work on them some more, I would finish them in a later session. But we're getting closer now, more of it is covered. And look how different the background looks to how it looked when we started, when it was that very kind of dark. It looked incredibly dark when it first went on. It looks kind of fairly light now. And I'm also going to quickly paint in a rough overall value for the vase, which is very low in value. So I'm just going to use ultramarine blue and ivory black and bring in a little bit of the phthalo green to send it a little bit more towards a greenish blue. So at the moment, the only bit, once I've filled this in, the only bit of the panel that won't have been filled in is this other little flower, which I will get to if there's time. But I want to get back to the rose now. So the point of all this is so that we have something to judge the rose against. Yeah, my lights are, I think, 5,000, something like that. Thanks, Candy. See you later. 4,000 is warmish, but it should be okay. But I mean, the ideal is to paint in daylight if you possibly can. You know what? I'm going to very quickly rough in this other rose, just really at the moment, just as an area of color here, this little one here. I'm going to mix this really, I don't want titanium. I'm going to mix this really quickly out of titanium white raw umber. It's quite low in value, and a little bit of yellow ochre to give it a little bit of chroma. And then if I have a lighter version, so I'm like, that was about value 5, I think. We want to go a little bit dark. It's very low chroma, that. What will throw you about that extra little flower there is how low chroma it is, though. But that white there is definitely throwing off my perception of the value of everything else. So I really want to just fill this in with pretty much the right color there. Really just very basic, just so that I can, it's not throwing me, you know, that white bit of panel isn't throwing me. So that was raw umber lead white with a very small amount of yellow ochre. And there's actually a very slightly higher chroma area just around the bottom here in the inside of the rose. Now we can see a little bit clearer everything that's going on. Okay, so now I feel free to play with the rows a little bit more. Overall, we pretty much have the panel covered. I'm fairly happy with the colors that are down there. I'm happy with the value balance. Everything looks pretty good. So I want to start thinking about the rows. So I'm going to do most of this just with these two brushes. The lights I use are Neewer LEDs. These days LEDs are the best lights to use. Patricia says it appears on screen that your paint is going on smoothly. Are you using liquid or something else to thin the paint? No, I hate liquid actually. I think it has a very plasticky finish. What I did was right at the beginning, I covered the panel with a mixture of linseed oil and terps. Any solvent will do, but you want linseed oil. 2 parts linseed oil to 1 part terps, pretty much. And then wiped most of it off. And I'm using mostly synthetic flats, so it helps the paint to go on fairly smoothly. Except in the background where I used a hog, where I wanted it to have a little bit more kind of texture, you know. So here's my light and shadow brushes. I'm also going to do a little bit of blending now, or smearing, as you could say. So I'm just going to pull some of this around, just to sort of smooth it out a little bit. Around here in the shadow, I'm going to break this edge a little bit. So this is a dry brush. It's another Winsor & Newton. A well-worn one, however, it's a synthetic. A fresh one will do as well. I want to soften everything that's in the shadow, basically. I've got to be very careful not to get, which I just did then, or try not to get any of the phthalo green into my purples, because I want to keep those colours pretty pure. But I think in terms of values and colours overall, it's not looking too bad. So the saucer here gets slightly lighter out here, slightly lower chroma as it moves towards the edge. So now I've got all of my paint here that I can mix with pretty freely. So everything that I put down now is going to mix into what I already have. So a lot of the time I'm going to want to try and mix something like a slightly lighter, say, for here than I want. So I've gone between my value 2 and my value 5. And I just want to bring this up a little bit in value on the outside. And it's coming down in chroma a little bit too. This is the fun part. Now we start to refine the forms. So I'm thinking about how the light is behaving and where I want to change the basic. The basic forms to start to refine them a little bit more. Around the edge, it goes slightly lighter. And actually here there's a little bit that almost pokes out into the light. So I'm going to go between the low chroma, between my value 5 and my value 7. And just touch in a little bit around the edge there. And I'll allow it to have a slightly sharp edge. So I want a sharp edge on the outside and a soft edge on the inside, because it's coming out of shadow. Just enough to start to show the edges of the petals here. I'm being led by the photo, but I'm not trying to replicate it perfectly. I'm looking at it and I'm thinking about what's happening to the light. So this plane here is starting to come out of the shadow and into the light just a little. I want to keep this hard edge here because that's the light against another form. So that edge needs to stay, the outside edge needs to stay sharp, but the inside edge is a cast shadow, which will be soft as it comes out into the light. So that needs to be softened. So down here, I need to sort some stuff out. It gets lighter as it's coming out into the light. So I'll bring the value here up a little bit. And I want it going back into shadow gradually and soft. Gradually and softly. Is softly a word? It is, isn't it? Yeah, good. Just sounded wrong for a minute. So I'm just dealing at the moment, I'm just dealing with the saucer, just trying to refine it a little bit and have it feel like it's about the right shape. Maybe bring that value up even a little bit more around here. So in here in the shadows, I want my deepest value, but around here, this part of the saucer is a bit lighter. A bit more light is getting over to it there. So now I'm starting to feel it going deeper here. I'm starting to feel the form turning in there, which is what I want. This part of the saucer should be lighter too. Just bringing the value up a little bit. Incidentally, someone was asking about, do you ever use that value scale to check the surface of the painting? Now would be a good time, because I want this value to be slightly higher here than the 2. So there's my value 2. So I can hold that over it, and I can see it is now. I don't want to hold it too close. Getting a little bit lighter, and if I wanted to, I could check the exact value there in Photoshop. I don't think it's necessary right now. Katie says, how would you grid a real flower, please, painted in North Light? If I was working from life, that's just a skill you need to develop. You can't grid it. I mean, there is a way you can. I mean, it's a faff to set up, but you can actually get something like this, which is, this is very old and has been used a lot, but it's basically a piece of foam board or foam core that I've cut a hole out of and put a thread grid over it. So you can put that in front of something and that would help you. But honestly, you're better off just practicing your drawing accuracy, I think, really. It's a really useful skill to have, you know. I'm just trying to get the right feeling here as this comes out into the light. When I feel, it's not about the detail, it's about the value and the chroma. When I feel like I can feel a plane change here, then I'll be happy and I'll stop fussing. And I think that's starting to come, and I'm pretty happy with that now. I can start to feel the difference between my cup and my saucer much more now. So that's probably as much as I need to do really on that bit at the moment. I'm just going to refine the drawing a little bit here, keep my hard edge. And up here it gets very light as well. So edges are, you know, they're almost like everything. But you'll also hear me say that chroma is everything, you know. But edges are so important. So it's really key that I have a hard edge against this leaf and a soft edge here where it comes out of the shadow and into the light. And I'll even overdo those edges. I'll even make that edge even softer than it really is, just to really create that feeling of form there. So I want a soft edge on the inside here, and then a hard edge against the background. And that's showing something coming out into the light from the shadow. So looking on the inside, I need to do something about my values here. These are too high. So I'm going to bring down both of these values, both the shadow side on this side, I'm going to bring that down a little bit. Because I want to get, I'm not hitting the right values there, I don't think. So I'm going between I'm down to my number 7. I'm going to go from my value 5 up to my 7. I'm in between on the chromas, I'm hedging my bets. I want to bring this down a little bit in value so I can feel this as being more in the right place, kind of conceptually speaking, in terms of light and shadow. So I'm looking at the shadowy parts of these petals and trying to find that value, because they are facing slightly away from the light. I'm still working in really general terms. On the other side, this side, I feel it's got a bit too light as well, so I'm going to bring that down. I will bring some areas up in value. I think this needs to come down a little bit so that when I put my highlights in, they'll make more sense. Right, so now I'm getting a feeling of what I want, basically. I'm starting to get a feeling of a cup sitting on a saucer. That's starting to come. So what I want to do now is to start to manage this edge where, as we go into the shadow here, there are some, this is broken, this edge. There are some petals still sticking out and they come right up in value. So if I go up to about my, not quite up to my 9, but quite close. And these brushes are great for this. These Eclipses or any synthetic flat will do this. So there's basically a couple of petals around here that come out, almost you could imagine from the side of the cup, and stick up into the light. And if your colors are right and if your values are good, when you put stuff like this down, it will work. And a big part of being able to paint, like, and this is kind of direct painting, sort of alla prima, is having the values right and the chrome is especially right. And then a lot of what you put down will kind of work. So all of that mixing and all of that, those choices at the beginning will start to happen now. So this form here, talking about edges, this petal here is coming up out of the shadow, but this outside edge here is the edge of the form against the light. I'm going to bring that value right up, actually. Bringing a bit of white into my highest value. I want a hard edge on the right-hand side. And lead white is lovely for this. And the same with this one too. I'm not bothering about the left-hand side. I'm going to sort that out in a minute. And then if I wipe my brush off and I'm careful, I can soften the left-hand side. And this is another thing these angled brushes are good for. You can get the point in. So on the left-hand side, it's coming up out of shadow, so I want a soft edge there. On the right-hand side is at the edge of a form. So I want a hard edge there. And if I can manage that carefully enough, you start to get the impression that it's coming up out of the shadow. That's the edges. That's entirely the edges that do that. So I'm just breaking this edge. You can see how hopefully how it's starting to come. Like all of that, that careful work at the beginning starts to pay off now. I don't have to worry about the colors and the values too much. I pretty much know what they are. I've already got them sorted out. So I'm doing this petal at the back here. So I'm focusing on getting a hard edge on the right-hand side. Then I'll come back in and soften it on the left-hand side as it disappears down into the body of the rose. Soft edge there. The edges show the form. Everything is everything. Yes, Susan. Thank you, Victoria. Yeah, Victoria, you're going to have You're going to spend a lot of time with this rose here. Okay, so I'm beginning to break this up. So now I'm looking for where these petals go into this light side, where the shadows are. So if I get my shadow brush, I'm going around the value 5 area. The chroma is in between the two. And I'm going to start trying painting in. So I'm going to attempt to leave some areas to show that there is a hard light edge, and to paint in some of these. I can see like the right hand side of these petals disappearing down into shadow. This is, now I'm working into the light. I've worked across into the shadow there, so I'm going into the light now. Around the top here, there's definitely some darker values where these petals are coming into shadow. They have a bit of shadow on them. So I'm not just trying to replicate what's there. I'm thinking about the form and where there's shadow and where there's light. I'm happy with my colors now. I think they're working really well. I think the values are good. So now I'm trying to think about how I can begin to bring in details. But what I'm thinking about is a form in the shadow and in the light. Like around here, why is it darker here? It's because it's facing away from the light, okay? So this area is deep into the rose and it's facing away from the light, so I can bring that in. There's an area here. I'm not trying to paint a perfect replica of the shapes that I see now. I'm thinking about the forms. Why is there a darker value there? It's because this part of the rose goes deeper and the light isn't going into it there. So I've brought this value down, but around the edges of the petals here, it goes really high value. So if I bring some lead white in, and this is where I like the lead white, and titanium won't do this so well. Bring some lead white into my value 9, really light, and I can start to edge in these petals. So just at the edge of them, they turn. The reason they're light there is because they turn towards the light. So it's a very small plane that faces the light exactly, right on the edge. So I want a hard edge and a very light value around the edges of those petals. Can you see how it's starting to come? And it all basically fits. It all builds off the foundation. And this is like all around the edge of this rose. There are parts where the petals furl round towards the light. So I want a hard edge on the left. And if I can manage it, a very slightly soft edge on the right, sorry. I love it when you get to this stage, when you start to really to create something. This bit here, this bottom part of the saucer furls out towards the light, so I'll bring that value up there. Gail says, are the edges inside of the cup soft on all the shadows? It depends on the form. So as it goes deep inside to the rose, they're soft, but there are still some parts of the rose where you can see, even in the light, where you can see the edges of petals, and they are slightly light. So I want a hard edge on the left, slightly soft on the right hand side here, to show that they are curling away from the light. This part I'm really happy with, it's starting to work really nicely now. I think I could go even darker on some parts of it. So if I bring out my pure magenta, bring in a little black, I think there's a couple of bits around here where it can go really, really dark. I don't quite have depth. So we have more chroma as well. I'm going to put in some neat magenta there to get more chroma, because we have more chroma in the shadows and less in the lights. There's also a hint of a petal coming around here, which is slightly lower value, because it's descending into shadow more. So I'm thinking, like looking at this overall, I think it's working fairly well. So I want to make sure, like at all stages of this rose, that it has a feeling of light, and that there is something actually there. It's not a question of throwing it down and then trying to save it. You know, I'm trying to sculpt the forms out of what I've got, but they have to fit with what I've already established for light and shadow on the overall form. So all I'm doing now is I'm breaking down the smaller forms, but I'm doing it. As I'm doing it, I'm still thinking about each area and how it's relating in terms of light and shadow. It's all about the edges show how a form is related to the light. So, girl, you were asking about edges a moment ago, like, let's say over here, you know, there is a light petal against a shadow. So if I bring the shadow in first, if you want to paint a hard edge against a shadow, it's usually a good idea to bring the shadow in. So if I make all of this a shadow area, except for the very edge where it pokes out to the light, you can hopefully see like all of that is kind of in shadow. And then with my light brush, I get my lightest value out. And there's a petal here that sticks out. So I want a hard edge on the right-hand side. So all of the petals on this side, I want a hard edge on the right and a soft edge on the left. The ones around this side, I want a hard edge on the left and a soft edge on the right. So I'll bring it in, making sure I get the hard edge. Not enough paint. May not have gone dark enough with the shadow, actually. Hard edge on the right-hand side. And then if I soften the left, it'll appear that it's coming out of the shadow into the light. You start to work it this way. Roberta says your palette even looks like fallen rose petals. Totally. If you can't see it here, it's not going to happen there. You know, it's not going to happen there. So I'm thinking about the middle now. I want to establish that middle because it's an important part of the form. It's kind of higher chroma, so I'm going from my high chroma value 2 up into my middle chroma value 5. And it's about here. So I'm looking for where there's a hard edge. So there's a petal that kind of walls, a wall of a petal around here. Wall as in W-H-O-R-L. So I actually have, around here I have a hard edge on the right-hand side and then soft on the left as it goes out. So let's think about that shape. Carve out the hard edge on the right. And then it comes out softer on the left. You really need to be very patient with stuff like this. Think carefully about what you're doing and the effect you want to create. Think carefully about the forms and how they're relating to the light. Don't just try it because you see a dark splodge, like stick a dark splodge down. I can almost guarantee you it won't work if you try and approach it that way. So I'm trying to end up with a hard edge here, and then it comes soft out as it goes out further out into the light. So this is a soft edge on the left-hand side, and I want a hard edge here. So if I get my light brush and really enforce this hard edge, that's going to look like a form there, rather than just a mark or a paintbrush. There's a shadow behind it. And this shadow here is going to have a soft edge as it comes up towards the light part there. And then against it will be another hard edge coming around here. She's coming bit by bit. I need darker values around here, I think. Goes into quite a dark value around here. And again, I'm thinking about where's the hard edge, where's the soft? Like this part here that I'm doing around here. There is a petal that comes around here that has a hard edge at the top. But as it comes out this way towards the outside of the rose, it gets increasingly soft. So I want to try and keep a hard edge at the bottom and let it go out soft. And I'm more bothered about those edges than I am about painting a perfect bit of rose there. Can you see how that suddenly created form there? Even though there's more detail to do, suddenly that creates form. It's the edges. If your values are good and if your colors are sorted out, if your chroma is good, the edges really describe the form. So that looks like it's dented in because I have a soft edge coming up here against a hard edge. I'm going to make that hard edge more obvious. But now I've made a hard edge here where I don't want one, so I've got to soften that in again. So now we should be starting to get the impression of the multiple layers. Yeah, it's beginning to come. I'm a little bit light overall, but I've got quite a bit of shadow still to put in. It's basically when I'm getting to this stage, I could just keep going forever. As long as you're careful. I mean, you know, you have to, it's worth pointing out that you have to know when your focus has gone. And when you just start painting on automatic and you're just putting in a dark mark, because you can see a dark mark on the rose. As soon as you stop thinking about the form, it goes. It is everything, Suzanne, yeah, it is. I go on about chroma and edges a lot because I think they don't get enough attention. People talk about values a lot. You know, everybody knows value is important. But edges and chroma, I think chroma is almost as important as value. So where is the edge hard? Where is it soft? I'm always thinking about that. See around here where I put this lighter petal there, as it comes round it goes slightly into more shadow, so I need to bring this down, the value. And where is it hard? Where is it soft? There's a hard edge on the left and there's a soft edge on the right as it comes up. The next petal along comes up out of shadow. And these things, I'm not kidding you, getting these edges right will make the difference. Assuming everything else is pretty much there, getting those edges right will make the difference between creating form and it just looking like brush strokes. Edges are so important. Especially with flowers. She's coming. So this is that horrible moment when I realise I can't remember which my light and my shadow brush is. Which means I haven't been careful enough with them. So light, hard edge, soft edge. There's a hard edge at the top here that creates that form coming down, and then soft as it comes out towards the outside of the rose. Bring that hard edge in. a bit stronger. And I'm going to soften all of this and darken it because I'm preparing for a hard edge. There's this petal here that comes around this way, but I'm going to put in the soft edge first, the value underneath first, so I can bring the hard edge in. And I do this a lot when, even when painting like, other objects, not flowers, I'll often do the cast shadow and all of the background stuff and sort all those edges out first, and then paint the hard edges over it. And it gives a real impression of depth. So hard edge on the left, as it disappears down into the rose, switch to the shadow brush and soften because I want a soft edge here as it goes back into the rose. And that will create form. Just putting a lighter brush stroke there wouldn't create the form. Yeah, Suzanne says you could go darker on the smidge above the center cup. Yeah, I've got quite a lot of shadow areas still to bring in. So I'm gradually, what I'm doing is I've sorted out my overall lights when I put the first values down to create the cup. And now as I'm working around it, I'm bringing in the shadows. So it's almost like I'm carving into the light. Every now and again, I'm bringing in a light where I want to create a bit more form, but the values of the overall perception of value is coming down as I'm bringing in more shadow areas. Here's an interesting thing. These little light parts here that go just around the outside. I've lost one here, I better put that back in. There's also, you get the same effect a little further in, so there's one that goes all the way around here. Just a very light edge of a petal there. This really is, for me, this is where it starts to be fun. So I definitely need a darker value here against this hard edge. And if you're careful, you can kind of almost do it by putting the brush down slightly diagonally. So your hard edge is the point going down, and then you get a softer edge behind it. And carve it, and basically I'm just carving a little bit deeper into the rose there. Bit by bit starting to come. I'm actually going to stop soon. From here, I would basically just carry on refining, bringing in more of the forms, working a little bit more each time, until I start to wonder whether I've taken it too far or it's really time to stop. And that's when I know I need to have a break and sit back and look at it. But at this point, I would say it's beginning to come. Like, this is the point, like in a rose painting, where I would start to feel confident that I was not going to mess the entire thing up and have to wipe it and start again, because the forms are beginning to work. Gradually bringing down the values in the shadows bit by bit. But all the time, I'm trying to think about the structure of the rose, not just to put in marks. That's the main point that I want to get across here, is that it's the structure that I'm trying to create. And these smaller forms are still forms in just the same way as the large forms were at the beginning. When I did it in a very simplified way. I'm just going to carve this edge of this petal using my background. This is, as I was saying earlier on, it's good to have some of your background left. I want to do a little bit of refining of the shape here. Start to bring in a little bit of the character of the edge. You're very welcome, Cindy. That's a lovely thing to say. Thank you. Oh, I completely forgot about the YouTube chat. Sorry for not keeping up. Moo of Fact says, apologies if you've answered this question a lot already, but can you briefly explain the difference between chroma and saturation? There isn't a huge amount of difference between them. You can almost use them interchangeably, but not quite. There is a technical difference in that it's something to do with, I don't completely understand it myself, but it's something to do with saturation being, no, I'm going to say something wrong. You know what? The best thing that you can do is go over to David Briggs' site, huevaluechroma.com, and he has a really good explanation of it there that I've read several times, and to be quite honest, it still hasn't really stuck in my head. It's to do with the way they're calculated. They're slightly different models, color models, but basically it's, you can think of it, they're not the same, but they're roughly analogous, I would say. But you want to really, for that, you're better off going to someone who can really explain it well. Like David Briggs is probably the most knowledgeable person on color that I know of. And he's also a nice guy. Which always helps. So there's some light, hard forms here. And then we want to be overall a little bit light around here because the bottom of these petals here are facing the light. So these will be higher value, slightly broader, coming around here. And that one still isn't light enough. The edge of the... Okay. I'm going to leave this demo here, although I'm tempted to carry on working on it a little longer. I'm just going to bring up the value of that there. I hope I've shown you, like, basically the main things that I wanted to show you is like, you know, each of the skills bit by bit that you need to learn, which come together. Judging the colors, you know, I use Munsell for that. I find it absolutely invaluable. Drawing something out reasonably accurately is, in a lot of ways, it's one of the easiest skills to develop, but funnily enough, it's one of the ones that people seem to be most resistant to working on. I don't know why, but it really makes a big difference. Understanding of form, you know, light and dark is huge, hugely important. Being able to control the edges. Now, a lot of that is brushwork, but it's also informed by thinking carefully about how the light is working, how the light is falling on the form, and which part of it is likely to be light and which part of it is likely to be soft and which part is more likely to be a hard edge. would definitely want darker value down here where I think there's some shadow. I would really love to work on this some more and to work on that little rose some more. But that's going to have to wait for the workshop. So like next week, this is what a lot of the people here already signed up. Next week I'm running a workshop, which is, I'll show you the thing actually, that this is a small part of the overall composition that we're going to be working on, which I think is, it's really quite beautiful composition. See if I might be able to bring it up actually. Digital Art Deco, do you know another supplier for the Munsell Book of Colours other than yours? I don't supply the Munsell Book of Colour myself anyway. The only one I know of is, well, there's Pantone. It's very expensive though. It's like $1,000 or something, I think the camera's a bit overexposed now. Let me bring that down a little bit. I think that's probably better. But you can also start with the student book, which you can, if you just want to start, for about $100 you can get the student book, which means you can do a lot that way. Like, one thing I want to put in actually before I stop. What's a good brush to do it with? This one probably. You see, like on the vase here is the highlights of the vase. Now, I haven't gone to my highest possible value yet. The highest possible value you can get in oil paint is titanium white. So if I wanted to put, I'm just going to show you this just to show you the value range. So I haven't gone up the top of my value range yet, but the highlights here on the vase, they are right at the top of the value range. So I would be putting those in with pure titanium white just to show you, that there's something else at the top of the value range that I haven't got to yet. And that would be the highlights of the vase, just to show the overall value range, The rose needs more work, like I would mostly be working on the middle of it from here. Let me see if I can find that. It's such a beautiful subject. So this is a small part of a bigger subject, which is this. That was a crop of it. This is a slightly different photo, whether you can see the other roses opened. And I'm going to be painting this over 2 months, basically, 1 live session a week. I just can't wait to get started on this painting. It's going to be outrageous fun to paint. It's going to be, slightly difficult, obviously, but it's going to be a lot of fun. So I thought this would be, a good subject to show some of it, of what's happening. Ryan says, Paul, your courses mentioned Munsell. Can you talk about what that is? I can, absolutely. Munsell is basically a way to understand colour in terms of hue, value and chroma at its most simplest. So just to show you quickly, this is Munsell in a nutshell. So this is value from light to dark. This is hue, colour family, whether it's blue, red, orange, yellow, green. And this is chroma, from high chroma to right down to grey. That in a nutshell is what Munsell is. It's a way of understanding colour from those 3 points of view. So it is numerical, if you go for the full thing, like Munsell created a numerical system to describe these things, but it's so accurate that if you gave me the number for the value, the hue and the chroma, I could mix the exact same colour that you're talking about. It's incredibly useful for teaching online because it means that as I'm teaching, if you have even the student book, even if you only have like this, the value scale, I'll put the link in for that as well, and you follow the recipes, then you will end up with something that's very close to the colours that I'm mixing, So it's very useful from that point of view. Okay. So actually, anyone who's interested in finding out about that, this workshop, you can find out more about it here if you haven't heard about it already. It starts next Monday. And we're basically going to be going through just painting this one subject, but we're going to do a bunch of smaller studies of each area of it to kind of figure out, you know, actually it would be really nice to put in, just looking at the big picture there, it would be really nice to put in the lighter, I'm going to completely destroy my colours here, but there's a lighter value like shadow that comes down in the big photo. It really is quite beautiful. Just suggest it in here just with a bit of white. Sorry, I'm going off on one a little bit now because this always happens when I get to this point with a demo and I start thinking, you know what, this is, with a bit more work, this could become painting. And I start getting tempted to keep on going. But I actually haven't had my dinner yet and it's like gone 8 o'clock for me. What time is it, by the way? 20 past 8. I hadn't expected to go for 2.5 hours. I hadn't expected to go for quite that long. So if there's anything that I would really love you to take away from this, it's everything. No, not really. It's that painting, even something as difficult or ostensibly difficult as a rose like this, is about a series of skills that you apply. You know, the accuracy of the drawing, the accuracy of judging the colours and mixing them right, understanding that in a low chroma object like this, oh, I really want to do some softening actually over there. Just a little bit of dragging, because this is all like shadow here. Just soften all of that. Ooh. Soften a bit. That's nice. So on a low chroma object like this, you have lower chroma lights and higher chroma shadows, and it's very important to get that. I've got some of my phthalo green in my shadows there. Oops, not to worry. But overall, this is quite a low chroma rose. You know, if you went in to paint this, you would probably go in with much higher chroma colours than you really need. And the you know, to be able to judge the values, to get the value range right, we've gone right down the bottom of the value range here. And what I find happens an awful lot when I'm teaching workshops, is that people don't go low enough on the values when they really need to get down the bottom of the value range. And it really compromises the feeling of light and form. Light and form. Yeah, I can't wait either, Kathy. Workshop is going to be great. I'm really looking forward to this one. Just as much as anything else, because the subject is so beautiful and it's so varied. So we've got the roses to do, we've got the cloth, which is gorgeous, and then that little silver cup and the gentle light on the background. He actually had lemon drizzle cake, Ginia, for his birthday. Lemon drizzle cake. Birthday breakfast. Romy, you're very welcome. Romy says, form is a very short word for the incredible sensation of feeling able to put my hand right into your rose. I swear I can feel the cool, soft petals. Such inspiration. Thank you, Romy, so much. It is an inadequate word for basically the importance of being able to show form. So it's the colour, it's the values, the chroma, and the edges. And being able to create form out of those, but it's skill. All of them are skills that anybody can learn. What Rosemary's brushes are you using? I used Rosemary's angled eclipses, which are very nice brushes. Very nice indeed. I hope I haven't missed anybody's comments. I do sometimes get a little bit involved and forget. Okay. So yeah, I'll send out the replay, the link to the replay tomorrow. But if you're on YouTube, this video isn't going to go away, so you'll be able to come back at any time. Obviously, you can slow it down and paint along with it then, if you want to find these colours. For Munsell people, I will put in certainly the colours of the rose. Oh, what is it, little man? Hello? What did you want? Just a pat. That's my cat banjo. I'll put in the Munsell colours for the rose. I will try very hard to remember to put in a link to the value scale as well, because that's incredibly useful, especially if you have Photoshop. really good for helping you get in the right area. So, you know, all of this stuff, you know, sometimes I think people think it's a little bit like, I have heard this said about Munsell, that it's painting by numbers. It doesn't make the art for you. It doesn't make the painting for you. It just stops you making some of the most obvious mistakes. Okay, so I'm going to go off now and get my dinner. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming. Had a lot of people, actually. I think like a couple of 100 people or something were watching today. And that's really nice as well to see. And for those of you who are signed up to the workshop, I'll see you all next week. For everyone else, I'll be back again, hopefully before too long, with another free stream. Okay. Thank you very much, and I'll see you soon.